Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you tips for Rep Paladins in Mythic Plus for Season 4, the Awakened Season of Dragonflight. Some of the tips will be for any class or spec or whatever, and some of them will be for Paladins, and some of them will be for Rep Paladins specifically. These are going to be based on just things I've noticed doing all 8 Dragonflight dungeons this tier, and questions that I've received, whether on a video or in-game or whatever, from other players. So that'll be kind of what I'm basing the tips off of. If you have questions, I can't guarantee. It depends. Like if only 5 people ask questions, I can answer all of them. But if it ends up having a lot of comments, it is hard to keep up with everything. But if you do ask a question below, I can try to answer it as well to the best of my ability. So one question that I got on a video was about embellishments. So embellishments in Mythic Plus have been kind of a weird thing throughout the expansion because, a lot of times the embellishments, in my opinion, were really focused on rating, in my opinion. There are some examples where that's not true as well. But a lot of them were, especially ones available to Rep Paladins. So for Mythic Plus, there's actually one that's definitely good for Mythic Plus, and it's the legs. It's not the legs that I have on, but it's like the Frost Fire leggings or whatever they're called, that you would have crafted. And those are really good for Mythic Plus because it involves hitting multiple enemies, getting you more haste, I believe. But regardless of what stat it is, it's like, okay, so I'm hitting a lot of new enemies and I'm getting a big buff for doing so. So especially, you pull 10 pack, you hit all 10 things, you get a nice buff, basically. I'm kind of simplifying it, but that's basically how it works. And so those are always good. Now, the problem with that is the eye level now of crafted items is a little bit lower than what you can get naturally. So if you have max eye level legs, that 3 eye levels, it's not very much, but that little bit extra strength, can kind of cut into the actual damage that the embellishment does on the pants. But they're still really good Mythic Plus pants to wear. Overall, you are losing some stamina as well. Again, it's not much, but it's a little bit of a minus now, whereas in Season 1, all the crafted items were like the same, but then they added the myth track and all that, and now the crafted items are a little bit lower item level. But those are definitely good. Now, what I would say to you, probably the best thing to use in Mythic Plus is probably the Spore Cloak. So that would be on your cloak slot. This is going to give you a little bit of offense and a little bit of defense. It used to be a lot of defense is what it gave you. But it's still probably the best thing for practicality purposes in Mythic Plus. And that's just because, when we're talking about embellishments got nerfed throughout this expansion to the point where they don't do a lot anymore. They never did a ton to begin with, to where whether you had the first best embellishment or the third best embellishment, like it wasn't really going to make a difference. And RNG could, completely squash it. And things have gotten nerfed since then and kind of homogenized as well. Some of the weaker things got buffed, but overall, everything's just pretty weak. And so embellishments are not super important when it comes to your damage, especially in Mythic Plus. So I think Spore Cloak, if you're a pure Mythic Plus player, is probably the best thing you could do to actually time keys, right? If that's what we're talking about, timing keys, then that's going to be the best thing. Obviously, if all you care about is your damage, then use 2 damage embellishments. Use the Frostfire legs and the Frostfire belt. Use Frostfire legs and a Shadow Flame patch. Use whatever you want to use in that case. But my suggestion is going to be probably for Mythic Plus only to use like the Frostfire legs and the Spore Cloak. I don't care that much, and I'm just using 2 flame patches that I already have from raiding. And yeah, I'm probably not going to get too much deeper than that personally, and it's not going to really make that big of a difference for me. But it is a good question to ask in case you didn't know. Another question that I had gotten recently is about it wasn't specifically about Mythic Plus, but it was about using Hammer of Wrath. And I think it's important to talk about this. Now, in my rotation, in my guide, when I mentioned rotation, I mentioned and I point out that you don't really use Hammer of Wrath much when you're AoEing. And I can really make this one really short in saying, basically, when you're AoEing a pack of mobs in Mythic Plus dungeon, only use Hammer of Wrath when you have no other button to hit, right? So, if you're using, unless you have Crusader Strike, right? So if you don't have anything talented here, where you have Crusading Strikes and Templar Strikes, if you have that blank, then Hammer of Wrath would be better than Crusader Strike. But other than that, you only use Hammer of Wrath if you basically have nothing else to hit, right? So you don't want to just sit there, so you hit Hammer of Wrath. Other than that, everything else is better because almost everything else is going to cleave, whereas your Hammer of Wrath is not going to cleave. And so you want to use those buttons instead. So I had a question about usage of Hammer of Wrath, and when you're AoEing, it's not good. It's a very good single target spell, and it's not good for AoE whatsoever because it doesn't do anything for AoE currently, at least. So that was another question I got. Those were the two like big questions that I wanted to address. There was more, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but those ones really stuck with me. Some other tips for Mythic Plus, just in general, I don't even have them talented currently, but have useful things talented, like cleanse. A lot of these Dragonflight dungeons actually do have things that you can cleanse on them. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. A surprising amount of them. And it wasn't that noticeable when there was only 4 dungeons with 4 other dungeons, but now when all 8 are together, there's actually a lot of cleanse mechanics that you can use. So that's very useful to have in most dungeons. And then, of course, Blinding Light, you want to have that for an extra AoE stop to get everything to stop casting, right? You wait till they're almost finished with their casts, and it does, it's going to be, they're not going to stay dazed, obviously, because they're going to get hit by everything, but you're going to stop the cast, and that's important to use as well. Some other things to throw out, if there's a big damage thing going out, right? And maybe you normally don't use your Blessing of Sacrifice. I know a lot of Rep Paladins don't. But if there's a big damage event going out and you're bubbling anyways, let's say you're bubbling to survive something, go ahead and throw Sack on the player that you notice is handling damage the worst. Maybe you have an undergeared DPS. Maybe you have an undergeared healer. Maybe the tank is also getting destroyed. Bubble Sack is always a strong option, and you can do that. Something else that I'm noticing in these dungeons is there's bleeds and stuns in multiple dungeons as well. And remember that Blessing of Protection removes physical stuns and removes bleeds, most bleeds in the game. And so you can always bop yourself or bop somebody else to remove those things. And again, this is something that's come up for me quite a bit early on in this season with this specific set of dungeons. And so those are just important things. Use your utility, use them wisely. There's specific instances where Blessing of Freedom is very, very strong too. I'm not going to go through each dungeon. I think I'd have to do a video on each dungeon if I was going to do that. But just remember to use your utility. If you're stunned, you're not necessarily dead. You might have a way out of it other than bubble. Bop can remove most stuns, at least physical stuns. So when we look at the actual dungeons that we have here, so we have Altaria Academy, Reckonite Hollow, Halls of Infusion, Neltharius, Ruby Life Pools, Azure Vault, Nokud, and Ultimate, right? So those are our 8 dungeons. A lot of these dungeons are really, really good for ret. Altaria Academy, this is a dungeon everybody likes, everybody can excel in, right? The best way to put this is when you do big pulls, that's good for everybody almost, right? There's very few specs where it's like, well, I hate when they do big pulls, but it's really good for ret because especially the way the timing works out, right? You kind of want a pull to last like 45 seconds ish, right? And then you build up, you walk over to the next pull, and then everything's ready to go again. 45-second pull is really good. You get your wings with all your cooldowns, and then you even get one extra Wake of Ashes in and Wake of Ashes burn, right? And then you get to the next pack, and then you get to do it all again. And then as you get into higher keys, a 1 minute 45-second or a 1 minute 50 pull is really good as you go into the next pull. And a lot of these dungeons actually do have that pacing for ret, even in the way that Pugs pull them. Altaria Academy is one of those. Even the way Pugs pull Altaria Academy is usually going to be very good for ret. And just in general, instead of going through each dungeon and being like, well, this one is pugged or pulled properly on Pugs and stuff like that, basically what you want to do is you want to use your cooldowns on big packs, and you want to use them often, right? You never want to just be sitting on a cooldown. Once you notice that your pug is pulling 1 pack at a time, right? Let's say a pug is pulling 1 pack at a time. What do I do? Because I'm afraid we're going to pull it big and I'm not going to have it ready. Generally speaking, that might happen. Obviously, you could ask your tank, hey, are you going to do a big pull at any point? Do I need to know where this is? You could obviously ask that. But also, if you're noticing that, like after the first 3 pulls, you pull 3 mobs, then you pull 4, then you pull 3, and you're doing short pulls like that, just start sending your cooldown. Start sending wings and Final Reckoning everything on cooldown at the beginning of a pack or whatever. It's not going to be, your overall damage isn't going to be great at the end or whatever. Your overall DPS isn't going to be great at the end. but it's going to be the best for that dungeon, for that group that you're in. And that's general advice for anybody, right? Especially if you're pulling in that way. Obviously, if you know you're doing a big pull, you want to have your cooldowns for it. But if you're going to pull one pack at a time throughout the whole dungeon, which is perfectly fine in most keys, to time them at least. If you're going to be doing that, you just want to send your cooldowns as they come up. And that's something that I see a lot too, where people sit on their cooldowns. I did a Mythic Plus with a Ret who, oh my gosh, they had such good gear. They had such good gear, such high score and everything. And I thought, honestly, I was going to get out DPS'd, if I'm being completely honest. They had their axe upgraded higher than mine, everything. I'm like, holy crap. And I out DPS'd them by like 80k for the dungeon, some of that is, yes, I'm probably doing my rotational stuff better than them. But a lot of it is too, just sending your stuff, knowing when to send your stuff, doing the dungeons enough to know, okay, this pull is always good. Even if I'm only pulling one pack, I need to have my cooldown up for this pull, right? Having that kind of awareness can really, it helps your group too, right? The pull dies faster. A hard pull dies faster. That increases the odds that you time your key. So it's not all about padding either. Sometimes it's about actually helping out your group and everything like that. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about, because I want to answer the questions. I want to talk about cooldown usage. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask them below. I mentioned this. This is another thing to talk about. So I got a little bit of pushback from this. I don't know why. In my I did like a trinkets and bouillon thing for Ret Paladins video. You can check that out if you haven't already. That a lot of people watched that one, and I suggested, especially if you already have the axe, right? You want to get this axe. This axe is absolutely carrying us in Mythic Plus, okay? The burn that this puts on the mobs is going to be your second highest damage in almost every single Mythic Plus you do. It's a ton of damage, okay? You want to get this axe if you can. If you already have it, you should have used your second bouillon thing to upgrade it and make it upgradable. Now, it was bugged for like 24 hours and you couldn't upgrade it, but now as you can see, you can. Mine's 14 out of 14. And this thing does a ton of damage. This thing's going to absolutely carry you in Mythic Plus. If you do not have this, right, don't be alarmed that you're not the top DPS. Don't be alarmed if somebody's higher than you. If you do have this, though, then you really should be aiming to be like the top DPS in your group, because it really will carry you that far if you have access to this. So do heroic if you can. I believe you can do regular heroic. It doesn't even have to be faded, right? You can go back and do it and try to get this axe if you don't already have it. It's going to completely carry you as far as damage goes, because you just need to hit everything and then everything starts burning, and it's a ton of damage, and it's really, really good. And so more than anything, you want to get this axe, you want to upgrade it. Like I said, I got a little bit of push from people like, oh no, I'm going to buy my trinkets first. I'm telling you, trinkets are great, but this axe at max upgrade does such an insane amount of damage that it's by far the number one thing you want to upgrade. You want to be doing 400, 500k DPS overall in your keys. Well, you need this axe and you need it upgraded. I'm here to tell you that. Right now, eventually, maybe you can do even more than that, right? As we get higher eye level. I'm only at 501 myself. I know there's people at 515, 520, whatever. I'm only at 501. If I got another piece, I could go up. I could put on my new tier and get to 506, but I'm only doing these keys at 501 and doing like one key I did like 440k, and that's not pulling MDI style pulls. That's pulling, a pack or two at a time. And you can do that damage, but you really do need that axe. I'm going to tell you that for sure. As far as trinkets do go, I mentioned it in the video the aforementioned video, but you want on-use trinkets. Specifically, what sims really good and what appears to be really good are the two on-use trinkets, of course. Ashes of Ember Soul being number one, and then the Iridius Fragment that drops from the dungeon, Halls of Infusion. Technically drops off the first boss, but in Mythic Plus it'll drop at the end, obviously. Those two on-use trinkets are really, really good because it's all your upfront damage. You basically just want to use the trinket into your, Final Reckoning, Divine Storm, Wake of Ashes, Divine Storm, Divine Toll, Divine Storm, and you just want to front load that damage with those trinkets. You'll do a ton of damage with that, and that's something that you want to be looking out for as well as far as doing damage goes. So, check out that video for other things as far as gear and stuff goes. But those are some Mythic Plus tips. Like I said, maybe the most important thing is if you have questions for your own Mythic Plus runs, how do I do more damage? I know one thing I do is rep Paladin very well in keys is I do a ton of damage. Like I said, I go in with other rets that have better gear than me, do way more damage than them somehow. Not sure about that, but feel free to ask questions below. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because that helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.